Erev Tov, everybody. Thank you for joining us. It's wonderful to be together. I'm on gallery view so I can see each of you. And if your video is off, I assume it's because you're moving bins from storage and beginning the process of getting ready for Pesach, as we all are. We just ended Rosh Chodesh Nisan, and these are the moments when our to-do lists and our hearts and minds are really turned to Pesach, which awaits us in just 2 weeks. Of course, it's a different kind of Pesach in more than one way. In the way of the unique and challenging moments that we are living in, our second Pesach since October 7th, the many ways in which the situation feels more acute, complex, and painful, so much loss and so much suffering, pleading and awaiting the return of our hostages, trying to find the right path forward. And also in a different way, a unique Pesach, because it is the rare calendar year in which Erev Pesach falls out on Shabbat, which brings up all kinds of fascinating questions, explorations, and experiences. With thanks to Rabbinic bracha, we have a wonderfully clear guide for how to navigate Erev Pesach Shachal b'Shabbat, Erev Pesach which falls out on Shabbat. Please find that on thebayit.org/Pesach. This is a chance, though, not to get too bogged down in the details, but to find our way to some moments of inspiration and sharing with your Bayit clergy team. We had the incredible privilege to hear Rav Avi's Haggadah Shiur celebrating his new Haggadah just a week ago, and we're sending Mazal Tov wishes to our rabbinic intern Josh Suatez. He and Natalie just welcomed a new baby daughter, Hadassah Michal, and we're thrilled to be here with you, myself, Rabbinic bracha, Rabbi Sarah, and our wonderful rabbinic intern Sophia, to share some teachings and thoughts. We'll do this as we've done over the last few years. We have a few rounds of questions which I will pose to the members of our clergy team. Please feel free in the few moments when the question is being asked before we start our answers to offer your own answers in the chat, or to think about what you might answer for the question, and then we'll make our way around to share our answers and then go from round to round. So we welcome your voice through the chat over our time together, and are grateful for the privilege of being your Bayit team and sharing this Yom Tov with you in the days ahead. Round one, question one. What is a favorite Pesach halakhah or minhag? Feel free to put an answer for yourself in the chat, a favorite Pesach halakhah or minhag or custom. And we'll be hearing first from Rabbinic bracha, then from Rabbi Sarah, then from Sophia, and then from myself. We'll give a few more moments if you want to type in an answer. Favorite Pesach halakhah or minhag, and then Rabbinic bracha will begin.
Good evening, everybody. Chodesh Tov. We just began Chodesh Nisan, and I decided to talk this year. You know, they can't all be favorites, but every year we're going to pick one. This year I want to talk about korech. Korech. I brought some sources to talk about it. What is korech all about? First of all, what is korech? Korech is the sandwich when we put together the matzah and the maror, the matzah and the maror. So here's a little teaching about how we get to korech. When we talk about maror in the Torah, the biblical commandment of maror, we have two psukim in particular that we focus on. The first one in Shemot, in Exodus, when God is giving the commandment, V'achlu et basar, they'll eat the flesh, the korban Pesach, b'layla hazeh, on this night, meaning the night of the 14th going into the 15th. How? Tzli esh umatzot, roasted with fire and matzah, al merorim yocheluhu, with bitter herbs or on top of bitter herbs. That word al is a little bit complicated. It can mean a few things in Hebrew. And we're going to see that that comes up a second time. In Bamidbar, in Numbers, this is actually not talking about Pesach itself. It's talking about Pesach Sheni, for those who were ritually impure, and Pesach Rishon, they have a second chance. That's something to talk about in Chodesh Iyar. We're not going to talk about that now. But we have similar instructions because the people who were not able to fulfill the mitzvah of Korban Pesach in Nisan are now going to fulfill it in Iyar, so they have to do it the same way. With Chodesh Sheni, in the second month, Arba Asar Yom, on the 14th, that's the Erev Pesach day, Bein Arbaim, that's the Bein Hashmashot, that's the dusk twilight time. Asu oto al matzot u'merorim yochluhu. They should eat it on or with or about matzah and maror, matzot u'maror. And it's just not clear from this how exactly the maror fits into the picture. I just want to say that separately we have biblical commandment for matzah. So we know that matzah sits all on its own. It is not clear where maror fits into the picture. The Tosefta says like this: the Torah commanded us to eat 3 foods, shlosha ma'achalim, on the night of the 15th, Tet Vav Benisan. What are they? Korban Pesach, matzah, umaror. We have to eat the Paschal lamb, the Korban Pesach, we have to eat matzah, and we have to eat maror. And then it asks just the question that I was asking. Ketzad yesh lochlam. How should we eat them? So there are 2 options. Bazeh achar zeh, one after the other perhaps, or sheyesh likroch, so you can hear korech in that word, et shloshtam. Maybe you should wrap up the 3 of them, the Korban Pesach, the matzah, and the maror, or perhaps 2 of them, not clear yet, ke'achad. Maybe they should be wrapped together. Why? Because remember it said, al matzot u'merorim yochluhu, that you should eat the Korban Pesach on top of, or with, or at the same time, or when you have all of them available. Unclear. Hillel Hazaken, that's the first Hillel that we know about, the Beit Hillel, Beit Shammai Hillel, She'ala mi Bavel Eretz Yisrael. He was in Babylon, in Bavel. He came to Israel. Hayta hanaga yichudit. He had a very special, unique custom. Hillel Hazaken haya korchan shloshtam ze bazeh ve'ochlan. He would wrap them up, all 3 of them, and eat them that way. Shloshtan ze bazeh ve'ochlan. Eat all 3 of them together. And in other places, we also have allusions to this. As it says in a Braita, that's another source that we have. They said about Hillel that he would wrap matzah and bitter herbs together and eat them, because it says, al matzot u'merorim yochluhu, which indicates these foods should be eaten together. But then in the Yerushalmi, so that's the Gemara that came out of Israel, out of Eretz Yisrael, it says Hillel the elder used to make a sandwich of all 3 together. Rabbi Yochanan said, no, the others disagreed with Hillel the elder. They didn't eat all 3 of them together. But wait a second, somebody else says, one second, I remember Rabbi Yochanan. He did make a sandwich of matzah together with maror. That's our korech, that's our sandwich. What's the answer? Hillel was around when there was a Beit HaMikdash, and there was a temple, and therefore he had a Korban Pesach, so he could make a nice sandwich out of all 3. But Rabbi Yochanan, he didn't have, it wasn't at the time of the temple, but he remembered, he kept up this way of Hillel doing it by keeping matzah and maror and making a sandwich. More on that in the second round. Back to you, Rav Stephen.
Rabbi Cyrus next.
Hi, everyone.
Oops.
So lovely to see you. Okay. I wanted to talk about 4 cups of wine, because who doesn't like to drink and make merry on Pesach and try not to fall asleep at the table in doing so? I think that the 4 cups of wine, as we know, let's just sort of establish the base of what we know. The first cup is drunk, we drink it during Kiddush. The second cup is we drink it to signify Magid, and the third cup is at the end of Birkat Hamazon, and the fourth cup is at Hallel. And as we also probably know, each cup of wine represents a state of being of the Jewish people, a reference back to our journey from slavery to redemption and freedom. And so the first cup of wine reminds us of V'hotzeti etchem mitachas sivlat Mitzrayim. I will bring you, V'hotzeti, I'll bring you out from under the burdens of Egypt. And the second cup of wine is meant to remind us of V'hitzalti etchem avodatam. I will rescue you from bondage. So first is I will bring you, and then I will rescue you. And then V'ga'alti etchem bizra netia, that I will redeem you with an outstretched arm. And then the fourth cup is V'lakachti etchem, and I will take you to me as a people. And so the 4 cups are V'hotzeti, I will bring you; V'hitzalti, I will rescue you; V'ga'alti, I will redeem you; and V'lakachti, I will take you. And I think that when we consider these 4 cups of wine, we often think about them as a trajectory from the lowest to the highest. That first we're just, we're drinking that first cup of wine all the way at the beginning, and we're just beginning to feel a release from the burden, right? Just the beginning of what it must have felt like to be freed. And then as we move along in the Seder, we're rescued, and then things get better and we're redeemed. And then ultimately we, like Hachdi, God takes us as God's people. And so it seems like we go from this low to high, from full slavery to full redemption. But when you think about it that way, that's not really the reality of the Jewish story. It's not really the reality of anyone's story, right? Not our lives aren't tracked in a straight line or in a trajectory from bottom to top, right? There's this notion of rags to riches, that if we the way we begin our lives, we're always supposed to be growing, and then if we just keep doing the best we can, we'll ultimately get to full redemption, to this higher and better place. And perhaps that's what we're supposed to be thinking about as we're drinking these 4 cups of wine. But I think actually on a closer examination, the whole Seder of the Seder, the whole order of the Seder is about ups and downs, right? We're saying Kiddush, which is actually this joyous, happy moment, and then we go back and talk about the people who may not have a lot of food, and we welcome the poor people in, right? During Magid, there are moments of highs and moments of lows, right? There's moments of sadness and going back to our the most terrible parts of our history, and then we get back to a place of highs and redemption. And again, same with Birkat Hamazon and Hallel. Like within each of those 4 sections, there are moments of lows and moments of highs. And so actually the 4 cups are not a straight line up. It's a little bit more like a wave, right? It goes up and down, up and down, and up and down. And I think that this is the reality of our lives and the reality of the lives of the Jewish people. There's an article that I read many years ago by Bruce Feiler, who quotes Marshall Duke, who's a psychologist, and talks about the idea that when we tell our family stories, and we should be telling our family stories, and in fact, the Seder is our family story, our nation story. There are 3 ways to tell it. The first way we tell a story is from rags to riches, from top to bottom. The second way is, we were we achieved so much, we made a lot of money, and then we lost it, and we fell into rags from like top to bottom, right? So first is bottom to top, and then top to bottom. But then he says the most common way to tell us stories is actually the oscillating narrative, that we go up and we down, we oscillate. And somehow, when we are able to embrace the fact that things are oscillating for us, that actually builds resilience. That actually gives us the psychological ability and mentality to keep hoping and keep ultimately trying to build up. And I think that's what the four cups are all about. It's not a straight line. It's actually embracing the fact that our world, our lives, our history, our stories is a little bit of up and down, and and that's okay, because we're going to spend the entire Seder experiencing highs and lows. And I'll just end to say that one way that I love this idea is to incorporate that into the way we operate within our Seder. Like at our Seder, we tell stories. We try to pull out like our own historical tales from my mother or my father, or like stories I may not know about my brother-in-law or somebody else at the table. And so in addition to literally engaging in the story and the narrative of our people, we are sitting around a table, and it's an opportunity and a time to tell our stories, and we shouldn't feel pressure to tell them all in the most positive light. There's ups and there's downs. It's oscillating, and that's just the way it is.
Thank you. Sophia.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone. So I'm going to cheat a bit, and I'm going to talk about a mitzvah that I've been thinking about a lot recently that I think is actually building up towards Pesach, which are the Arba Parshiot, which we're currently in right now. So there is a set of specific parshiot that we read, four of them, leading up to Pesach time. So the first one was Parshat Shkalim. That was already a few weeks ago, where in the Maftir, at the end of the Parsha, we learned about the donation of the half shekel that was given in order to contribute to sacrifices in the temple. Then we read Parshat Zachor, which is about wiping out Amalek, and that's right before Purim. Then there's Parshat Para, which is about the red heifer and purification from death for that in order to eat pure sacrifices. And then we just had this past Shabbat, Parshat HaChodesh, which is the Shabbat that leads up to right before the new month of Nisan, where we talk about sanctifying the moon, which is actually the first mitzvah that Bnei Israel get as a nation, is to sanctify the moon in Rosh Chodesh. And I've been thinking about it a lot because it's making me think about what does it mean to prepare for Pesach. Like I think when we think about preparation for Pesach, we, or at least like my parents or my grandparents were on the Zoom, they probably think it's about taking out the pots, it's about cooking the amazing food and like getting that all ready in advance. But I think that the installation of these parshiot is asking us to think about how to also spiritually prepare in advance. And there's a specific halakhah that I would like to show you that I learned this past few weeks about the Arba Parsha that's making me think a lot about the spiritual preparation. So here we go. Okay, so in the Shulchan Aruch, we see a list of how these Arba Parshiot work, and I encountered a really interesting halacha, which is there's a Yeshomim, there is a differing opinion that Parshat Zachor and Parshat Para need to be read on a deraita level. It's incredibly important for us to hear them, and therefore we need to make sure that we hear them with a minyan. We make sure that we go to a place like a minyan, like synagogue, in order to hear them well. And then the Rama adds in, you should even make sure that you hear them in like the tune of Torah reading to make sure that it counts. And I found this was really interesting because, at least sociologically for me, I'm used to hearing about Parshat Zachor talked about this way. Like people got to come to shul. There's going to be an extra reading at mincha to make sure that people who didn't hear it could hear it later. But I'm not used to hearing about Parshat Para like that. And I thought that was incredibly unusual. So it made me think a lot about like what's so special about Parshat Para. I looked in Aruch HaShulchan, who is a modern commentator, Rabbi Chil Meir Epstein, from the 20th century. And what he was saying is that the reason why it's so important is that we don't have a chance to do the sacrifice today. Therefore, being able to read it in advance of the Korban of Pesach is super important, because we used to have to think a lot about this purification process before Pesach because we were going to eat a Korban. We were going to eat the Korban Pesach. So we don't really do that anymore. We don't really sacrifice red heifers and eat lamb chops at our Pesach Seders. But the idea that actually reading Parshat Para as a way to make ourselves spiritually purified in order to then go into Pesach, I just thought was really fascinating. And that means we've actually already started our Pesach prep. Sometimes getting started on the prep can feel like the anxiety-inducing thing, but actually we already started. Parshat Par was already a week and a half ago. And I just thought that was like a really interesting framing. I'm not used to thinking about Seder as Pesach. We talk about the Korban Pesach in the Seder itself, but to have like yet another liturgical reminder of like this is what the Seder used to be. We were like eating a sacrifice and you had to be pure in order to eat the sacrifice. I just thought like really brought me back to thinking like what was that like thousands of years ago to be eating this big lamb chop situation with your family. But also like what does it mean to have this little mini opportunity to have a sacrifice like in your own family home? Like what was that like? So I feel like this is a really, I've been thinking about it a lot like the past week or so. It's making me think a lot about this upcoming Pesach and even in a world where we're not going to be eating the Korban Pesach, like, well, what does it mean for our Seders to be like the locus of where sacrifice and connection like to God to that used to be like? So that's something that I'm thinking about.
Thank you. When I thought about a favorite Pesach halakhah or practice, my mind went to biur chametz, to burning the chametz. As a kid, my sister and I would stand out on the side of our house and burn the breadcrumbs that we found the night before at Bedikat Chametz. Often when we were younger, with my grandfather, my mother's father, with inside the upturned metal lid of a garbage can. More often, I think you see the burning happening in the garbage can itself, but we just had a few crumbs of bread, so we just turned the metal lid upside down and made a little fire in there. And it was just a powerful intergenerational moment that I look forward to every year. And looking at the origins or the Mishnaic discussion of this practice reminded me and took me on a little brief free association journey, which I want to share with you. The Mishnah in Pesachim talks about how biur chametz, the elimination or destruction of the chametz, is supposed to take place. And it says that Rabbi Yehuda says, Ein biur chametz ela sreifa. Burning or destroying the chametz, maybe removing the chametz, is only achieved by burning it. V'chachamim omrim af mefarer v'zoreh laruach o matir layam. The sages say, no, that's not the only way to do it. You can also crumble it up and spread it to the wind, like just kind of make those crumbs into even tinier crumbs and just sort of throw them and let the wind scatter them, which of course they might even still wind up on your front lawn. But somehow they're so small and so spread that they're no longer chametz, o matir layam, or throw them into the sea. And it provoked two thoughts in me. One, of course, is that matir layam, throwing into the sea, takes me to the other moment on the other pole of the year, and when we do something with bread and water, which is tashlich. And there's a certain feeling burning the chametz, even though it's not throwing it into the sea, but there's a certain feeling burning the chametz that reminds me of tashlich. It's just getting rid of this thing that somehow is representative of something we're not supposed to have at this time. Whether we really internalize the notion of chametz as that spiritual puffed upness, our wrongdoings, or the moments where we've been a little too full of ourselves, and that's what we're burning when we burn our chametz. It sort of took me through that little portal of casting into the sea, that even when we're throwing it into the fire, in some way we're doing the same thing we do at tashlich time. And part of the power of tashlich for me is the communal aspect. The opportunity to stand around with people from our community, and we might not be talking with each other about what we have in our hearts and minds when we cast those breadcrumbs, but we know we're each invested in that process. And in our childhood, the process of burning chametz was just within our family unit. But coming to the Bayit, I have the opportunity now to participate in more communal chametz burning opportunities, whether on the shul's little barbecue grill as people come by on Erev Pesach, or at the Bronstein home, where everybody is always welcome each year to come and throw their little crumbs into a big garbage can, along with our lulavim and other things. This year is a little bit different because it's Erev Pesach Shachal b'Shabbat, and so the normal time we would burn our chametz would be on Shabbat, but we don't burn things on Shabbat. And so we move it back to Friday, interestingly, at the same time of the morning, even though in theory we could burn it all the entire day. But to keep a consistent practice year to year, we'll do it on Friday morning. And we'll preserve those communal opportunities on Friday morning. But then, come Shabbat, after we eat our last bits perhaps of chametz Friday night or Shabbat morning, we may then return to the solitary experience, just in our households, of discarding those last crumbs. And for many people, they may have the equivalent of matil layam as we flush it down the toilet, those last few crumbs. They find their way through the pipes. Something to think about: where do our crumbs actually go? And how do we make sure our environment doesn't suffer as a result? But this is sort of a collection of thoughts for me, the personal, familial, and communal, what we feel when we're casting our chametz and burning it, and what we're trying to achieve in those moments, and how it will be similar and different this year. Round 2 coming at you in a moment. Okay, what's a favorite Seder-related text or moment? So now we're zooming in and focusing in, not just to the entire universe of Pesach, the days before, but within the Seder itself, a particular text or teaching or a particular moment that speaks to us. Feel free to pop into the chat for you a favorite Seder-related text or moment in the Seder. We'll hear from Sophia, Rabbinic Bracha, myself, and Rabbi Sarah in just a moment.
So I'm going to cheat a little bit. I feel like I said that last time. Where I'm going to talk about a favorite moment of mine in the Seder, but frame it in a text that actually comes from Seventh-day Pesach. So a favorite part of my Seder experience, I go home to Toronto every year and experience with my big extended family there, is when we sing Hallel. It's really sweet because we're a family of all kinds of denominational backgrounds, and everyone just gets super into the singing. And I find that really meaningful. And I found a text last year that frames like what exactly I find so empowering about it. So last year on the 7th day of Pesach, I went to a synagogue called Petach Tikva in Toronto. It's a Spanish-Moroccan synagogue, and they have an amazing piyut that goes like this. Okay. So I was in shul, and all of a sudden I see this, which is Ashira Kishirat Moshe. So nice. So they're saying, I'm going to sing just like how Moshe sang on the water. And then they quote the pasuk that says that. But then right after it says Ashira Kishirat Miriam al Svat Hayam, where it says, I'm going to sing just like Miriam sang on the water, which is amazing because I feel like nowadays we think, how do we add in something about Miriam into our Seder? It feels like a new kind of feminist edition. Well, this is a piyut that's existed for hundreds of years. Then we have an opportunity of singing from Yehoshua when he sang on Har Gilboa. I don't even remember when that happened in the Tanakh. Then we have Devorah singing on Har Tavor, which we do see in the book of Shoftim. Then we have Hannah singing when she had Shmuel, and they quote that. And then they have David, and David sings a lot because he wrote Tehillim. Then they have Shlomo. Then they have Israel singing Ashira Kishirat Yisrael Beviat HaGoel. Az Yashir Yisrael et Divrei HaShira. I will sing like Israel will sing in order to bring on redemption, which is like a really interesting, they're calling back to something that hasn't actually truly happened yet. But I do feel like this is how I feel like at that time of the Seder, where our singing, like we're not just reading texts that talk about singing, but our singing ourselves is like part of what brings that redemption. It's like part of what it means to be free, is to have that kind of singing. So I thought that was like really a helpful framing for me about what I find so particularly meaningful at that point of the Seder. I don't know how you all experience your own Hallel in Seder, but like it's totally fine to like sing it as if you're in shul experiencing like a nice Rosh Chodesh davening Hallel. So we take all the different tunes like we usually would sing in shul, but we sing them at our Seder. And then to think that that opportunity to sing together like that is a way of bringing redemption is definitely one of my favorite parts of the Seder.
Thank you.
I did promise you that we will continue with korech. I've always liked korech. After you have the dry matzah, and then you have the maror, everybody's either choking or going, or showing how fiery it is. or whatever it is, then you get an opportunity to have something that might even be tasty. If you like matzah, don't talk to me about oat matzah. That's for a whole other conversation for gluten-free people. And the korech to me, even as a young child, I found it fanciful and whimsical, even though, as I showed before, it was really rooted in halakhah and all the way back to biblical times. But I always love that it starts with a story. And the story is Ken Asa Hillel, or Ken Asa Hillel, and that we're remembering what Hillel did. Thus did Hillel do at the time of Beit HaMikdash. So for me, this always felt like we make the bracha on the matzah. We have to. That's a mitzvah. It's actually a biblical mitzvah. We make the bracha on the maror. Today, that's rabbinic. If you remember, we discussed that maror only happens when you also have the korban Pesach. Matzah stands on its own. So today it's rabbinic. But this whole idea of making a sandwich, and I think at one point as a child, I learned that sandwich is called a sandwich because the Earl of Sandwich, and somehow that twisted in my mind with Hillel, and I'm like, does that have anything to do with it? There was a store called Safta Sandwich on Rehov Hillel in Israel, and the whole thing just connected in my mind in Jerusalem, that we call sandwiches because of Hillel, but actually the word korech, likroch, means to bind together, and the binding of a book is a kricha. So we see that's what he did, was he took them together. And I found this limerick. Rabbi Hillel took Torah's exact commandments regarding the act. Eat it on bread, unleavened, herbs spread. A sandwich he took as a fact. And you may know what the sandwich with our matzah looks like, because you're literally the matzah is breaking and it's making crumbs all over, and you're trying to have it not fall with the lettuce inside because you're having the sandwich. But if you had a Sephardi matzah, most of them, or a lot of them, are soft, a little bit like a pita, and that makes more sense that you could make it like a sandwich. So I'm imagining Hillel never even barely got to the meal between matzah and the wine and then Mar, and then korech. This is like having a lafa. Anybody have a lafa in Israel? They're super filling. So I don't know how anybody could be hungry after that. And you can get them today as well. As you can see, I looked it up just to make sure. And these hand matzahs are no cheaper than regular hand matzah. Look at this, 6 to 7 matzah per box. I hope everybody can see this. Let me see if I can make it a teeny bit larger. Here we go. So he's holding around, right? It's soft and he can hold it, but the price per kilo is $50. That's 2.2 pounds. So it's still worth its weight in gold, whether it's hard or soft. That's not going to help, but it may be more delicious if you had it that way. So I'm all for korech this year.
Thank you. Sophia referred earlier to the author of the Aruch HaShulchan, Rabbi Yechiel Michal Epstein, and his son, Rabbi Baruch Halevi, the author of the Torah Tamima, wrote a commentary on liturgy, which includes some comments on the Haggadah, called Baruch She'amar. And some searching brought me there, and brought me to a fascinating comment of his on Avadim Hayinu, that just opened up something I'd never thought about before. Avadim Hayinu, of course, is such a powerful moment. There are a few moments in the Seder night where I feel we settle into our chairs. And Avadim Hayinu is one of those moments where we say, okay, we're in it now, and here we go. Magid is opening up in front of us. And the author of the Baruch She'amar, Baruch Halevi Epstein, points out something fascinating about the way the language of Avadim Hayinu is expressed. And I'm attempting to share it with you. Hold on. There we go. Okay. Avadim Hayinu lefaro b'Mitzrayim. Vayotzienu Hashem Elokeinu misham biyad chazaka b'zroa netuya. We were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt, and God brought us out of there with a strong hand and an outstretched arm. And then we say, V'ilu lo hotzia Kadosh Baruch Hu et avoteinu miMitzrayim. If God had not brought our fathers, our ancestors, out of Egypt, we would still be enslaved to Pharaoh in Egypt. The subject shifts. We say we were slaves, and then we say, but if God had not brought our ancestors out. In fact, says the Baruch She'amar, we should actually have begun Avadim Hayu Avotenu LePharaoh b'Mitzrayim. Our ancestors were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt. And he says this by making an even more substantive point about the style and structure of the Haggadah and of Magid. You have it here. He says the opening passage of the Magid seems to depart from the classical style of much of the Haggadah. This is not a literal translation, but a little bit of a paraphrasing of his comments. Normally, we have a rabbinic statement followed by the word shene'emar, as it says, and then a proof text from the Bible to back up the original statement. Look, for example, at one of the other big answers in the Haggadah, not avadim hayinu, but the mitchila. In the beginning, our ancestors were idol worshippers, but now God brought us to God's service, shene'emar, as it says, etc., etc. And a little bit later, blessed is God who kept God's promise to Israel, Baruch Shomer Havtachato Yisrael Baruch Hu, because God thought about what the end was going to be, shene'emar, as it says, meaning the usual structure of the Magid, literally, the person who's telling the story of the Haggadah, is to talk about something as a narrator and then quote a pasuk to prove it. But this breaks the structure. Not avadim hayu avotenu, but avadim hayinu. And in the end of his comment, what Rav Baruch Halevi says is, aval signon halashon shelafanenu, the language of avadim hayinu as it is in front of us, lo eda liyashvo kefi shebe'arnu. I don't know how to resolve it, how to square it with the standard structure of the formulation of the Haggadah. So if he doesn't know, who am I to suggest? But I can only imagine that maybe one possible explanation is because our central mandate on the Haggadah night, on the Seder night, is chayav adam lirot et atzmo ki'ilu hu yatsa miMitzrayim. We're obligated to see ourselves as though we went forth from Egypt. So even though the normal structure of the statements of the Haggadah is to talk about something and then quote a text, when we begin the journey, we just break that structure and jump right into the first-person experience of having been there. Avadim hayinu, we ourselves were slaves. To remind us, yes, we're going to be telling a story and quoting verses to prove it and narrating, but in the very beginning, we break that form to understand ourselves as having gone through that. So take a close look as we read the Haggadah over the Seder night to see this normal structure, the narrator and a proof text being quoted, and we'll be aware as we begin with Avadim Hayinu that we're not saying our ancestors were slaves, even though we then say, and had God not brought out our ancestors. We're saying it was us, ourselves, and we jump right into seeing ourselves as though we were enslaved and then freed from Egypt. Rabbi Sarah.
Wow, learning so much from everybody. Thank you. Okay, so I just love yachatz. I love it because it's near the beginning, when we're still sitting down and feeling a little bit excited. We're not bored yet. Well, the kids aren't screaming, if that's what your Seder looks like. And mostly it's also a sensory experience. The yachatz, the matzahs, the three matzahs are picked up. The middle matzah is taken out. It's broken, right? So you hear like the sound, you feel it, you hear it, you see it. And then of course the larger piece is put aside for the afikoman, and the smaller piece is put back into the middle. And it's just bizarre because it also doesn't fit in the Seder, the order of the Seder. Generally, one would think that the time that you like engage with the matzah is when we're about to eat matzah, right? Like that's what we do. We wash, we lift up the matzah, you break it then. That's when the afikoman should be like scurried away and stolen by a kid. Right before you eat, right before you sit down for Shulchan Aruch. So, why is it all the way at the beginning? And what's it meant to like bring to mind? So there's so many ways I can go with this, and I guess I just want to share a few thoughts. The first is that I think it's purposely put at the beginning of the Seder to remind us that in this ordered Seder, there's actually chaos, right? Like we sit down and we're meant to like follow a specific trajectory, but right away we do something that's out of order and brings chaos into this Seder of Seder. And I think that's lesson number one, that we could strive and strive for Seder, but Yachatz reminds us that the world is full of chaos, and in a way we have to accept it, embrace it, work with it, manage it, whatever way we try do that. It's like sort of thrown in at the wrong place. Of course, it's thrown in there so that children can ask, right? That children can ask, well, why are we lifting up this matzah now? And so it's meant to get them excited about the afikomen so that they stay up until the end of Magid. And I'll just put in here, and I probably shared this before, that my dad actually hides the afikomen on the first night, and then the kids steal it and hide it on the second night. That's what we do in our house. And I'm sure I shared this before, but no matter how many Seders I've sat in, and no matter how old I am, I never ever see my dad hide the afikomen. It's just magical. Like it just disappears. And my kids have passed on that mystery to my kids, and so it's like this magical moment. Um, just one final thought about Yachatz. Just actually two more. Just one is just to remember the sound of it, right? In the silence of the Seder, right? As we're just supposed to wash and sort of have this quiet moment, and then the Yachatz is broken. I think we're literally supposed to be thinking about the cries and the brokenness of our world. I think it's a really serious moment as well. Again, right before we've even begun to think and talk about Magid, it's a moment to take a breath and think about what we have and what other people don't. And in fact, the next thing we say right after Yachatz is halach mananya. This is poor man's bread, and the Gemara says halach. The Gemara says mar darko she'ani beprusa, just as a poor person eats a broken piece of loaf, so too matzah must be eaten as broken pieces, right? The fact that a poor person has to break up and eat tiny little crumbs, we're supposed to be thinking about that person, the lechem oni, the halach man anya, the poor person, as we watch the crumbs fall out of the Yachatz crummy matzah. So that's one of my favorite parts, and I hope that when you have that breaking moment that's just like broken and chaotic and out of order, you bring your own ideas and thoughts and thinking to it. And I'm looking forward to hearing what you make of Yachatz.
Thank you. Okay, coming towards our end with our two lightning rounds. Lightning round number one. What's a favorite Pesach song? Could be from the Seder night itself or something you associate with Pesach. Feel free to pop that into the chat as we listen to this new Deborah Sachs Mintz Karev Yom for a few moments, and then we will hear favorite Pesach songs or melodies from Rabbinic Bracha, Sophia, myself, and Rabbi Sarah.
How did you know, Rav Steven, to pick the exact words to the song that I was going to share? This is one of my favorite songs. I believe that the Boston Rebbe in Boston wrote the melody. I could be wrong, but that's what I remember learning when I grew up, and we always loved singing it. It's the end of Vayihi b'chatzi halayla, which is all sorts of things that happen at midnight, in the middle of the night. That's one of my favorite. I've shared that other times. This is at the very end. קרב, קרב, קרב יום, אשר הוא לא יום, אשר הוא לא יום ולא לילה. קרב, קרב, קרב יום, אשר הוא לא יום, אשר הוא לא יום ולא לילה. רם רם הודו כי לך היום, אף לך הלילה, איי איי איי. רם רם הודו כי לך היום, אף לך הלילה. It's simple, it's easy to sing, it's a nice way to finish Vayhi b'chatzi halayla. Let's sing it one more time. קרב, קרב, קרב יום, אשר הוא לא יום, אשר הוא לא יום ולא לילה. קרב, קרב, קרב יום, אשר הוא לא יום, אשר הוא לא יום ולא לילה. רם רם הודה כי לך היום, אף לך הלילה, איי איי איי. רם רם הודה כי לך היום, אף לך הלילה. Recordings available upon request.
So mine's kind of silly. I like halakhah, but I like this version of halakhah. You might even know what I'm about to play. All right, I think you got the point. That goes on for like 3 more minutes. But points to anyone who actually can do that at their Seder. I would love to hear if that could be pulled off.
Shulam Lemmer before he was famous. Really awesome. I think a song which has entered our family's playlist of late, which doesn't feel like it has a direct Pesach connection, but I think we may sing at our Seder, was introduced to us by our 11-year-old Ilan. It's called Ani Ma'amin, and in a time of challenged faith, this message of Ani Ma'amin as believing, hoping, and knowing the road is long resonates with me. I'm going to read you the first few lyrics and then just play. They tell me that I'm holding on to something that is long gone, long gone. I look into the future. I know time will prove them all wrong, all wrong. Don't need to see you by my side to know I'm not alone. I look up to the sky and tell the eagles, take me home. They say forget about this dream you're dreaming. I will hold on. I hold on. I'll keep holding tight. I won't get lost in the dark of night. I believe, and I don't care how long. Yeah, I will hold on. I will hold on. Ani Ma'amin.
They tell me that I'm holding on to something that is long gone, long gone. I look into the future, I know time will prove him all wrong, yeah. Don't need to see you by my side to know I'm not alone. I look up to the sky and tell the eagles, take me home. They say forget about this dream you're dreaming. I will hold on, I hold on. I will keep holding tight. I won't get lost in the dark of night. I believe and I don't care how long, yeah. I will hold on, I will hold on. Ani Ma'amin. Ani Ma'amin. It's hard to see you in this darkness, but I know that you're here.
All right, so love that. I I also love Vihi Shamda. And I have memories when I was a child growing up in South Africa. We used to have, as I'm sure many people did, our communal Seder. We would, get together in school, and the morning before Pesach, we would all have a mock Seder, and it was great because we really got to practice singing all the songs. And so many of those songs that I practiced as a young kid are still today the songs that my sister and I lead in our Seder. And what many of you probably know is that although my father is a Levi, none of us can sing, including him. He's actually like even worse than I am. I think he would even admit that. And so it's hard for us to change up tunes. And so for many, many years, we sang sort of this classic, Vihi Shamda, Lavotenu. Anyway, and that is the song that that is the tune that we automatically still sing. But what happens when Seders become intergenerational and the world keeps turning is that children enter the scene. And a few years ago, when one of my kids was in 5th grade, he was in the choir, and he is blessed with a beautiful voice, and introduced us to the classic tune, which was already mentioned, by, I think it's Jonathan Razel, and actually I found a version, Rose Steven, from that I think was at the Ishai Rebo concert with featuring Jonathan Razel. But the reason why I love that tune is that when we get to that like Matsilenu part in the middle, that was Zachariah's solo, and he was like pre-pubescent, and he just had to sing it in this very, very high voice. And so every year we try to make him sing the Matsileni part on the like very high note, which he obviously can't really get anymore. But we sing both of them, and it's part of like my past, but also like part of my children's. And so we like singing them both. So I'll play I'm gonna try play it, I think. Tell me if you can hear. You're gonna get to the
Okay, making our way just to our closing little round. And
חסר סידור פסח כהלכתו, כל משפטו וחוקתו, כאשר זכינו לסדר אותו.
these are a couple of would you rathers I will pose to two of us, just to answer. Would you rather A or B? And you can give a very, very brief moment's explanation for those who want to pop in their answers into the chat. Would you rather A or B? So, Rabbi Sarah and Rabbinic Bracha, this year Erev Pesach falls out on Shabbat, and we have to squeeze in some meals before the time for ending eating chametz is up. There are generally two recommendations on the table, if you will, to eat regular bread, or a gluten-free equivalent, or to eat egg matzah. Would you rather eat your regular bread in Erev Pesach Shechal b'Shabbat or egg matzah?
I don't understand egg matzah. I can't imagine ever wanting eating egg matzah. So bread all the way.
I think egg matzah is awesome, and then people can use it to put their tuna fish and egg salad on.
Great. Okay, for Sophia and Rabbinit Bracha, would you rather hide the afikomen or look for the afikomen?
Ooh.
Definitely hide the afikomen because then you know where it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, control, power.
Great. And we'll conclude, myself and Rabbi Sarah, would you rather drink the whole cup every time or just the minimum amount?
Just the minimum. I get headaches. Too much.
I think the wise thing to do is just drink what you need to drink, but I have that streak in me that I gotta down the entire thing, and I definitely pay for it by the end of Hallel. Just more kind of sliding down in my seat with that heavy exhaustion. But I have my empty cup to show for it. So thank you to everyone for being with us, and hope some of these Seder sparks, melodies, and sharings will lift up your own Seders. For those who need, you can always join and wish. You can always join the Bait's Sedarim both nights. Don't hesitate to be in touch with the office. We have an amazing WhatsApp group that Rabbinit Bracha answers all your timely Pesach questions over the next 2 weeks. And you might have someone Chol HaMoed too. So feel free to join that WhatsApp group. This recording will be posted for those who didn't have a chance to see it, and we're here for any of your questions or needs. And one of the best things about Pesach is sharing it with our Bait family. So thank you for being a part of it. Thank you for allowing us to be a part of your family. Chag Kasher v'Sameach. Good night, everybody.